Yes, well, basically my PhD, I've only just started, so I still don't really know what I'm doing, despite coming in at 9 o'clock every day. But I will definitely look at sectarianism in monarchical Iraq, and specifically I want to look at the relationship between colonialism, nation building, state formation, and probably the Shia community in the south of Iraq during this period when obviously the Iraqi state was essentially created from 3 provinces of the Ottoman Empire. And I want to pose, I suppose, the big question of whether this period witnessed what we can call like the initial sectarianisation of Iraq, whereby a Shia identity became assertive, politicised, and then eventually, in more contemporary times, turned into a very kind of violent phenomenon. I think the best way just to talk about now is probably just to talk about how other people have looked at sectarianism. And I think you can kind of divide thinking on sectarianism and ethno-nationalist mobilisation into 3 broad categories. There's sort of a primordialism, instrumentalism, and constructivism. So the primordialist interpretation assumes that sectarian identities are pretty coherent, rooted in ancient communal loyalties, and pretty unchanging across periods of time. And then it assumes that modern-day sectarian conflict essentially rises from these ancient, organic identities. It's pretty popular in the media, and it also seems to be pretty popular in sort of the foreign policy establishment. We even heard Barack Obama talking about how the current problems in the Middle East were a result of an ancient feud, 1,500 year civil war. And I think it's also one of those interpretations that has often led to people justifying authoritarian regimes in the Middle East. This idea that you'd have to have a strong dictatorship that just keeps an iron grip on these tribes that will be warring forever. And a final thing, it often comes out of an uncritical evaluation of the colonial archive. You see a lot of, when the colonialists have talked about set sectarian groups that they perceive to exist, some historians have taken that as read. Certainly in Iraq, that has been the case. On the other side of the argument, the instrumentalists, or instrumentalism, kind of sees sectarian groups as completely changeable and almost subject to the whims of ruling elites and colonial policies of divide and rule. And this really takes it too far the other way. It kind of removes all agency from the actual groups on the ground, and basically says that everything is the result of an external power. And you see a lot of that now today, with people saying that sectarian mobilisation is just to do with Saudi-Iranian rivalry and things like that. Obviously, sectarianism from above, that you could, that's how you could describe that, does exist, but it needs to be accompanied by what some scholars have described as sectarianism from below, and that's where this sort of constructivist approach has come into the study of sectarianism in the Middle East. Basically, this argument meets the 2 others in the middle. It assumes a certain amount of sort of organic nature of sectarian groups, but it also accepts that state policy and especially colonial policies were important for the development of assertive sectarian communities. And at the same time, it also focuses on the importance of local leadership. The key focus of this approach is moving away from asking what causes sectarianism or why is there sectarianism in the world, and looking instead at what does it signify in a society, what are its manifestations, and in what context does it occur. So I think, it's certainly been done very well recently for Lebanon. There's been a lot of studies on the Shia community in Lebanon, and also the sectarian conflicts in Lebanon in the mid-19th century by Osama Makdisi and Max Weiss. And a key argument of these scholarships has been that the sectarian mobilisation that has been witnessed in those countries is a very modern phenomenon. It's often expressed, in a modern discourse, in a modern way, and then at the same time, it's also come out of modern processes of nation building, colonialism, institutionalisation, etc., etc. And it's not a reactionary process. It's not just a reactionary, like a pre-modern reaction to the nation. It's actually founded and built on modern, on modernist thinking. So these scholars of Lebanon, I realise I haven't said anything about Iraq, which is probably a bit silly, but these scholars of Lebanon have used religious texts, contemporary, sort of writings of the time, as well as legal records to construct a really kind of rich picture of what it meant to be sectarian in Lebanon in the early 20th century, mid-19th century. Nothing similar to that has been done for Iraq, perhaps because it's impossible, but hopefully not, and that's what I'm going to try and do. Using mainly as a source base is going to be things like contemporary Shia scholarship, as well as a quite rich kind of journalism that was extant at the time. Thank you.